scared individual.
Scary.
Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow.
Hi, you may not know me, but my name is Wabilla, and welcome to Things I Thought Of, a show where I talk about things I thought of. I'm currently hiding in my closet. There's something that's out there that's been haunting me for a lot of my life, and it's just that. Haunting, anxiety, or fear.
The Federal Emergency Management Association has issued a state of national emergency for the United States. A significant entity has been detected within American borders that imposes a threat to national security and poses a situation of apocalyptic proportions. For your safety, stay indoors, do not speak to anyone, and always practice extreme caution. If outdoors, seek shelter immediately. Stay tuned for more information.
Fear is one of the strongest feelings I know. I've always been someone who has just generally been afraid of things. The mesothelioma commercial, tornadoes, the dark, the apocalypse, kidnapping, dogs, people who look like dogs that look like people, whatever this is. But in all seriousness, there are some experiences that have really stuck with me. For example, I remember when I was 6, there was a television show called Caught on Camera that aired on MSNBC in 2007. As a younger kid sitting in the living room of my childhood home, my parents had just left the house, and as I was passing through, the program caught my eye on the television. And something about the low-budget camera visuals for the intro were really captivating to me. As Contessa Brewer walked on the screen, I was treated to a marathon of situations that were coincidentally caught on camera.
Welcome to Caught on Camera. I'm Contessa Brewer. When people commit violent crimes, they put themselves and others in serious danger. The outcome is never certain, and police officers who respond are faced with the tough challenge of dealing with the threat while protecting the lives of innocent bystanders, often caught in the middle.
This ranged from debatably funny videos of people slipping and falling, to natural disasters, to hostage situations, and police dashcam footage. Ignoring the implication/propaganda that comes with these kinds of programs, I was really captivated by how raw the situations were. I was watching real people going through hostage situations, being shot at, natural disasters sweeping their homes away. It was fascinating, but I was stuck. Stuck watching some pretty horrifying real situations.
Nathan drags the down into the bushes, and they continue to struggle.
Then I got on my neck, and when I got on my neck, you see me going down, and I grab my.
I can't see anything! I need help! Man, we're on our way.
Eventually, I had watched 3 full episodes of this program, and it was getting dark outside. Once Caught on Camera's programming had ended, I was treated to a documentary or retelling of the collar heist, aka the pizza heist.
15 years ago today, pizza delivery man Brian Wells was killed in a bizarre crime. It ignited a federal investigation and gained international attention.
The story is quite unsettling. Essentially, a pizza store employee by the name of Brian Wells was at work at a pizza shop on August 28, 2003. The pizza shop received an order and Brian went out on the delivery. According to Brian, while he was on the delivery, he was cornered by 3 black men who gave him a cane-shaped and strapped a to his neck. Once again, I understand the shittiness of this guy and this kind of programming. In order for him to remove the bomb, he'd have to go on a scavenger hunt, but first, he was instructed to go to the bank and steal $250,000. After walking out with much less than that, he was caught by the police. While detained and not receiving help from the bomb squad, the bomb went off. There are some details that have come out about why Brian was involved in this situation. Allegedly, he was partially in on the job. Regardless, at the age of 8, I sat frozen looking at the screen as chilling images of Brian and the collar bomb were permanently etched into my brain. That frozen state that I was trapped in is one of the many ways that the body responds to fear. There's a specific section in our brains that controls our fear response called the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for gauging how severely we're going to respond to emotional stimuli. In situations where we experience fear, instead of energy going to our frontal lobe, which is responsible for impulse control and language, energy is routed to the amygdala. This is why when we're experiencing fear, sometimes it can be hard to speak or make rational decisions. Once energy is routed to the amygdala, it signals to the hypothalamus that we're in danger, and that ramps up our sympathetic nervous system, essentially the body's gas pedal. That's how we attain all the energy that we may need in a perceivably dangerous situation. Blood pressure and heart rates increase, your senses sharpen, and our body releases blood sugar and fats from temporary storage. There's a network of hormones that activate when the body is faced with fear. The one we're most familiar with is adrenaline, or epinephrine. The other important hormone, cortisol, helps determine how long our foot is on the gas. We'll talk more about cortisol later. Knowing how our body reacts to fear, we can split up our fear responses into 4 different categories.
1. Fight. When faced with a threat, you may decide that the best course of action is to engage in combat. This can be in the form of verbal or physical altercation. 2. Flight. When faced with a threat, you may decide that it is unwise to engage with it. In this case, attempting to flee as far as possible is the best course of action. This is only effective if you think the threat can effectively be outrun. 3. Freeze. In some cases, it may seem best to stay very still. Do not move. Do not speak. This is the best course of action when the threat is one that may pass due to inaction or lack of awareness. 4. Fawn. Although the threat is extremely dangerous, it may sometimes be bargained with. When fawning, you may engage with the threat by pleasing it in order to reduce the chances of danger. This may mean compliance with uncomfortable demands or enduring harm to reduce total damage.
So cortisol, aka the foot on the gas pedal, in some cases can remain on longer and more often than it's supposed to. There are a lot of regulatory things going on in your body. A series of one hormone signaling the release and non-release of another, which signals another thing and another thing, and a large web of allowing you to properly respond to situations as well as maintain homeostasis, which is basically balance. The problem with high levels of cortisol in your body is that you're constantly or more often than not in a position of increased fear, wariness, or anxiety. One of the most common things in individuals who experience anxiety is increased cortisol levels. This can be due to a number of reasons, ranging from prolonged stress to debatably genetics, there seems to be some back and forth on that, or some other third thing. The key to fighting anxiety, however, is to... What's that sound? Hi, how are ya? Are you enjoying the video? If you are, may I interest you in joining my Patreon. For as little as $1, all patrons receive access to my exclusive Discord called the Yellow Zone, as well as a bonus video for every video I post. This week I'll be telling the story of how I almost got stabbed, as well as some other bonus content from behind the scenes. In every video, all $5 patrons will have their names shown, all $15 patrons will receive a doodle, and all $25 patrons will receive an exclusive animation. Speaking of, I'm working on a big holiday special for the end of the year. If you'd like to help out, consider joining my Patreon. I also have a Ko-fi account open and my Venmo down below if you'd like to make a one-time donation. Maybe this holiday special can help me figure out why I have this weird hole in my chest! Help me! To receive your Patreon perks and access to the Yellow Zone, go to patreon.com/Babilla. To make a one-time donation to the holiday special, go to coffee.com/Babilla or use the Venmo down below. That's patreon.com/Babilla, coffee.com/Babilla, or the Venmo down below. Thanks!
I'm afraid of heights. Acrophobia, It's actually why I got into aerial acrobatics in the first place. I thought that maybe if I had a sense of control, I might be able to conquer my fear. But I'm still afraid of heights. Just now swinging through the air 15 feet above the ground feels safer than being in a very tall building, I guess.
So as someone with a frankly incredible amount of anxiety, I have an incredible amount of things I'm afraid of, like doorbells, people generally, small spaces, being underneath things, so like a bottom bunk, or like, oh, but I do hide under tables when I am nervous, so I don't know what that is. I'm afraid of scorpions. I mean, if you're going to be a spider or a crab, make a decision. So yeah, lots of things.
While the threat can sometimes be found in league with the whole, details about the whole are widely unknown, and yet they are extremely common.
We all remember creepypastas, right? Probably not all of us. I mean, we're not all 23 years old. And not all of us were raised by YouTube from the years 2006 and onward, hiding in the computer room because I technically wasn't allowed to be on the website. Anyway, creepypastas. According to the creepypasta Wikipedia, a creepypasta is a horror-related legend which has been shared around the internet. The term creepypasta has since been used as a catch-all term for any horror content posted onto the internet. The stories are normally pretty short, but are centered around topics like murder, paranormal activity, haunted pieces of media like video games, and deciding to take the long nap. I'm not explaining that. There's plenty of popular ones like Sonic.exe, a creepypasta about a haunted copy of Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Genesis. To the Backrooms, an infinitely liminal space that it's possible to no-clip into. However, I have very vivid memories of one creepypasta in particular, and it's that of Jeff the Killer. To describe it briefly, Jeff was being attacked by some bullies, but the altercation ended with him nearly being arrested for assault. His brother took the fall for him and was subsequently taken away. After falling into a deep depression, Jeff's parents forced him to attend a party. Little did they know that Jeff's bullies would also be in attendance. Jeff unalived the bullies but suffered major burn damage due to an alcohol-related fire, and once discharged from the hospital, he loses it when he finally sees his face. Using a knife, he carves a permanent smile onto his burn-laden face and removes his own eyelids. After unaliving his family, he went on to become a serial killer, sneaking into people's houses and whispering, "Go to sleep," before, well, you know. This story was unsettling enough on its own. However, the truly scary thing was a supposed image of him that was circling around the internet. To this day, it still makes me extremely uncomfortable to look at. It makes me wonder, why are we so fascinated by scary content in the first place? In a Washington Post article entitled, "Why We Like Scary Things, The Science of Recreational Fear," Richard Sima writes,
When we are afraid, our endocrine system releases adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol to help prepare our body for physical action. We know the Halloween movie franchise's Michael Myers is not real, but our brain still responds as if he were a knife-wielding threat. One brain imaging study found that watching horror movies activates threat response brain regions such as the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and insula as if the danger were real. After this rush, many people experience an elevated mood. One study examined how 262 adults felt before and after they entered an extreme haunted house. 50% of people said they felt better after the visit. Brain recordings before and after showed that those whose mood improved had a smaller neural response to subsequent stressors, which is associated with the post-haunt high.
There's another reason why people may enjoy consuming horror content, though. It gives people the opportunity to...
I'm afraid of vampires. No, really, I am afraid of vampires. I have been ever since I was a kid. I had this fantasy that I had gotten turned in the night and was secretly going out to hurt people, and I was so scared of hurting other people that it developed into a full-blown phobia, and I can't watch vampire stuff anymore. You'd be surprised how often that comes up.
I'm afraid of horses. I went on a field trip one day and I saw a horse up close, and I remember just wanting to cave into myself. If you look into an eyes of a horse, it looks like there's a man's soul trapped in there and it's just begging to get out. It's a running joke now between me and my friends. But yeah, I am not a fan of horses at all.
The threat is known to take multiple shapes and forms. It could easily come in the form of a human, in person, or on television. They can also come in the form of sounds you hear in the woods, food on your plate, numbers on the screen, or even thoughts in your own head. The threat is likely in the room with you now.
What does it mean to be a monger? What is mongering? There's a whole profession based on curating, selling, and specializing in cheese called a cheesemonger. Cheesemongers are cool. Fearmongering is bad. What does it mean to fearmonger? Well, fearmongering is the action of deliberately arousing fear or alarm about a particular issue. Most of the time, this is done to manipulate people, whether it be on a large or a small scale. Knowing what we know about how fear can cause us to act, it makes sense that fear would be used as a way to manipulate people on a macro scale. You commonly see this in the media or through politicians. The 24-hour news cycle incentivizes the use of fear. When people are afraid, they remain glued to the screen, often hoping for a resolution that will never truly come, as well as getting you to watch advertisements.
I saw this boat in half!
Politicians do this all the time, specifically politicians on the right, especially these days. Here are some ways that you can easily identify when someone is fear-mongering, along with some examples. 1. Speaking for others. A lot of times, people who have the intent to manipulate you will create an argument or statement about a specific group of people, saying that they will do XYZ. XYZ being something you won't like or something scary. This plays into another tactic, us versus them. For example, when you hear people fearmonger about the border crisis, when attempting to manipulate people into thinking that the border should be closed, they make sweeping statements about individuals of undocumented status.
This is a full-on invasion. It is a crisis, and they don't care about the body bags that are piling up. They don't care about the women being sexually assaulted. They don't care about the children being brutalized. They don't care about the over 100,000 drug overdoses that we had last year, 2/3 of which was from Chinese fentanyl coming across the southern border.
They are stealing our jobs. They are and stealing from people. They are bringing deadly fentanyl into the country. 2. Manufactured vulnerability, essentially implying that the threat will be attacking in some way at some unspecified time. You never know when it will be, and they often refuse to give an example of when it's going to happen. In the aftermath of 9/11, fear of remained relevant for years. First, the threat was Al-Qaeda. Then, in the early 2010s, the threat shifted to ISIS. However, during the different waves of fear of terrorism, said fear was used as a talking point to justify military action. 3. Wrongful attribution. This is taking a situation that's happened and pinning an unnecessary explanation to it in order to paint a group in a specific light. One instance of this is the sensationalism around violent video games.
Every day, the news brings more and more images of random violence and sexual aggression right into our living rooms. Violence and violent images permeate more and more aspects of our lives. And I think it's time to draw the line.
In the 1990s, the hubbub around violent video games like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap sparked a Senate hearing that eventually led to the establishment of the ESRB. Despite the valid introduction of the video game rating system, fear-mongering about gaming continues even today. As recently as 2018, in the aftermath of the Stoneman Douglas or Parkland school shooting, one of the deadliest in American history, former President Donald Trump attributed one of the many causes of the gun violence epidemic to violence in video games.
And we have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts.
This seems to spark another debate around violent video games and the effect on individual aggression. It seems like this is a lot more commonly known now, but it's been scientifically debunked on multiple occasions that video games have any significant effect on aggression. In fact, it seems like they have the opposite effect, which can be strange for some people to hear. People like to defer blame for problems they cause on their own. 4. Overgeneralizing. This is taking one instance of something and spreading it to mean that everything is like that one instance. And 5. Making it scary. When people are fear-mongering, they'll often do whatever it takes to make that thing sound as scary as possible. That can come in the form of exaggeration, up drama, or music and imagery.
Here's a question for you. Just how far are the radical left and inside the Beltway bandits willing to go to stop him? Let's conspire with Hillary and the FBI with fake stories about him. All to distract from Biden's incompetence.
All in all, these are all tactics that people will use to sway opinions on a larger scale. Fear can also be used to manipulate people in interpersonal relationships as well, though. While there are a lot of ways people can be manipulative, the tactic's efficacy can often be boiled down to fear. Passive aggression, fear that you've upset someone without them having to confront you. The silent treatment, fear that they'll never talk to you again. Fear. Just like fear-mongering in the media, individuals can use fear to control you. This can happen in romantic or platonic relationships, like when someone uses how you feel about a certain environment against you, or are overly critical of you to make you act how they want. I mean, in general, in parent-to-child relationships, a lot of people believe that a child should fear their parents at least a little bit, which I don't agree with. I think the use of fear tactics in order to get a specific outcome speaks to a lack of ability to share an idea in a healthy way. But what is relevant in the case of both of these is what you're supposed to do to fight it. It's really important that you...
I'm afraid of being forgotten. The idea that I could make so little impact on the world or the lives of people I care about that they just forget about me. I have a lot of abandonment issues, if you couldn't tell. So yeah, that one scares me a lot.
I guess I'm afraid that nothing I do matters, I'm afraid that my and other people's attempts to make the world a better place or whatever are futile and self-serving. It's that and worms. I'm terrified of worms.
The threat is cunning by nature. The Federal Emergency Management Association has increased the threat level to imminent. It is only a matter of time before the threat consumes us all. The threat is in the room with me now. No, wait, no!
I have anxiety. It's mostly social, but it extends to other stuff too. I think a lot of the components of my anxiousness have been pretty similar for a lot of my life. I know how avoidant I would be of one-on-one interactions as early as middle school. It would terrify me so much that I would cancel on people all the time last minute. When I'm in a group, it's so much easier for me to kind of blend in or be blind to the individual eyes that are looking at me. I can publicly speak for forever because it doesn't really feel like I'm looking at people, really. Once the number of eyes looking at me gets to a certain point, it stops being fathomable, like how you can't conceptualize the number of grains of sand on the planet. Feels like it's gotten worse in the past couple of years, which I'm sure is relatable to a lot of people. I sit and stew about all my social interactions, hours, days, weeks, or even years after they've happened. Anytime I feel any amount of anxiety, I feel like every single experience I've ever had is coming back to haunt me. And then it stops being about my initial trigger. That could be like watching something particularly unsettling on TV. It then becomes about the fact that I'm afraid. I start being afraid of being afraid. I start being anxious about being anxious. I'm scared of a panic attack coming on or my life coming to an end. When it comes to anxiety though, I've learned a lot from the techniques that I've been taught before in therapy. Let's start with meridian tapping, or the tapping technique, or the emotional freedom technique. That's a funny name to me for some reason, but I promise to take it seriously. Originates from a combination of Chinese acupuncture and Western psychology. The combination of tapping on certain points of the body while focusing on negative emotions or physical sensations is supposed to calm the nervous system and set you up to deal with these kinds of situations better in the future. So first, you assess the amount of anxiety you're feeling in a given moment on a scale from 1 to 10. Then, you come up with an affirmation with a particular structure. Next, you begin tapping on the specific points of your body. Those points being the eyebrow point, side of eye, under nose, chin point, collarbone point, underarm, and top of head. You tap each of these points 5 to 7 times, and once you make it through, you reassess your anxiety levels, going until the anxiety subsides. Here's how it looks and sounds.
Start by tapping on the side of the hand. It's called the karate chop point. One hand taps on the other. Doesn't matter which hand you use, whatever feels comfortable, and repeat after me. Even though I have this stress in my body, I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
Even though I'm worried, panicking, or anxious about blank, or even nothing at all, I deeply and completely accept myself. One of the worst things about when you're having a panic attack or when you're feeling anxious and you're starting to ramp up, as I like to call it, is freaking out about freaking out only makes things worse. It's like we enter a roundabout, but the roundabout is really scary and there doesn't look like there's an exit. The whole point of this affirmation, however, is not let's get the anxiety to go away. It's acceptance that the anxiety is there. We accept fear all the time. We invite it. The other reason why people reported to have an interest in horror is because it's a way for them to cope with their real life anxieties by having something more tangible to focus on. Like a skinny man who wears a suit in the middle of the woods. Weirdo.
By pinning down what is causing us to feel fear and dread, people can have more control over their emotional state. Over time, by playing with this fear and anxiety, people could implicitly learn some emotional regulation skills for how to feel because you're expressing them and feeling them in a safe place.
Consuming horror content can apparently better prepare us for dealing with real-life situations. It's like getting to play make-believe, but with scary things. It can help us when real threats arrive because we built psychological resilience. Sometimes people try to make us afraid. When someone is trying to use fear to control you, take what they're saying and think critically about it. Your brain is one of the most powerful tools you have, and using your critical thinking in order to understand what people are telling you is important to making sure you're not being manipulated. This isn't me endorsing conspiracy theories that lack legitimate evidence, by the way. Most of those have evidence against their legitimacy. What I am saying is this: don't instinctively follow the crowd. If you can tell that the people around you are already in a tizzy, that's not going to be helpful to you. Take pause for a second. Seek a wide variety of opinions and assessments. This allows you to see things from multiple angles, which could help if you miss something. Look for verifiable facts. Focus on data and the legitimate knowledge involved in whatever the topic is about. This can help you know if your fears are even those that require action. Look for other explanations. Just like I said before, it's important to examine things from all angles. But especially in the case of minority groups, if you're going to look critically at a situation, just know that there's probably a lot of context that you don't understand. Keep things in perspective. Though one specific instance of something may be scary, you have to consider the context in which it happened. And that's also why, in the case of assault on white men, even though you as a white man may get your feelings hurt in a situation or may get defensive, the reality is you're likely never going to feel any significant or material consequence for this war. Or simply ask yourself, am I being manipulated? Which brings me to interpersonal relationships. If there's someone in your life who is coercing you, lying to you, withholding affection or communication, judging you, saying hurtful things, or you feel like you need to walk on eggshells around them, please talk to somebody about it. You don't have to deal with this alone. Always remember to prioritize your safety, and in the event that you confront this individual, when someone starts to lose control, their behavior can become erratic. Do what feels healthiest for you. The first thing is acknowledging you're being manipulated. If you can confront the other person, whether you need a professional mediator, a friend, or on your own, make sure you emphasize your perspective without assigning blame. It should make things easier for them to understand, but sometimes that doesn't work. The resources for this and the tapping technique will both be in the description down below. All this with the main goal not being eradicating fear. Fear is good, it keeps us on our toes and out of danger. It's an important part of your survival. Which brings me to my last point. To quote a 2012 Broadway musical about teenage boys selling newspapers in New York, going on strike to get fair pay, courage cannot erase our fears. Courage is when we face our fears. But hey, that's just a thing I thought of.